Hey everybody, it is Monday night. Welcome to Culture on a Stick. I am Christian Doyle. I'm going to be your host today. My guests this evening are Mark Thomason, Chris Odie, and James Durham, all from various Zoe projects. And we are here today to obviously to talk to our Patreon subscribers. Hey guys, good to see you. I hope you can see us because we can't actually see you.
I might be able to in a moment. I'm working on it.
Nice. Okay, we're working on getting chat up and running, which is great news for everyone. What I want to talk about, we've got a couple of hot topics in nerd news this week, and I thought maybe we'd go over them as just, four regular dudes, all of the same gender and skin color, and wow, that's actually kind of rare for this studio.
So let's talk about women and minorities then.
Yeah, okay, that seems like the most responsible thing to do.
Right, yeah.
Somewhere Ben just decided to end his vacation.
Right now, that is the moment that everything changed.
Eyes are bugging out.
Yeah.
I can't leave you alone for one show.
No, this is actually a rarity for us, and quite by design. But we are going to talk today a little bit about, like I said, things that had happened in nerd news this week. The first thing I want to talk about, which I think directly relates to some of us, is PC character death in role-playing games. It made the news this week because on another streaming show...
Spoilers are coming.
Yeah, on another streaming show, which I will not name, but you should probably know the name of anyway, a character was killed. Not in a scripted way, but in the way that many of us who grew up gaming lost characters, which, as you know, for the player, it can be really traumatic. I mean, I've had friends that have quit gaming altogether because their character died.
Seriously,
it's happened. People get really attached, and in this case, it was more like because we're in this age of streaming games. A lot of people were really upset because it was a character that they all cared about so much.
Can I break character and send a request in chat right now?
Yeah.
Paximo, if you're watching, can you please text me the link to the YouTube feed so I can just stop digging for it?
Okay. So I guess what my question is
not actually on here.
Have you lost a lot of characters? Have you killed a lot of characters? Like I kind of want to know where you're coming from and where your opinion on this lies and why.
So I've played a few games that compatriots of mine have been killed, but it's been pretty rare. As a GM, I haven't GM'd a huge amount, and most of the GMing I did has been in D&D 3rd edition or 3.5, which has the nice feature that I always appreciated, where 0 hit points isn't death. It's right. You start dying, and when you hit -10, and that feature going from 2nd edition to 3rd edition for me was kind of a big nice feature because it allowed me a few times as a GM to prevent a character from dying because he got hit, knocked down, and then the characters that were attacking the NPCs didn't feel the need to go over and hit the guy lying on the ground unconscious, but went after other targets, and so that kind of prevented it. But generally speaking, I don't think I've actually played in a game where it wasn't kind of already okay and the GM knew it was okay with the player character, that character is going to die. So it's been I'm not really sure I really am driving this character. We've been playing, we're only about 3 levels into the game. We've been playing for 4 months or something like that, and it's I don't know if I really like this character, so if you feel like killing it off, that'd be okay.
Yeah, and I've dealt with that a few times myself too, where you have that one player who just wants to change their character all the time anyway, and all their characters usually end up dying in comedic ways because they want to bring in their new whatever class they decided to hack together.
But they're getting what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who follows the Demon Hunter stuff, Steve Payne, who played Wolf in the original Demon Hunters, has done that a few times in games that I've been playing.
In Jesse Stratton, who played Albrecht, the man with 1,000 accents,
right?
Depending on which sentence he was speaking, that's his game style. He just gets bored with the character and then runs him off.
Didn't Matty J play Albrecht?
No, he played. Or no, you're right.
I think I'm right.
Albert?
I think I'm right,
Albert?
guys.
Who did Jesse play?
I don't remember. One of the other ones.
He was the one with a lot of accents.
Yeah.
But what was the character name?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either, and I'm a big Demon Hunters fan. It's just been a few years since I've watched that one.
Yeah, same.
Mostly because it's the one I've seen the most times, in all honesty, because it was the one I had on VHS.
Yeah.
There you go.
Going back to our topic, I've had a lot of experience with both character death on the GM side and the player side of the table. And I started playing in the early 80s. I'm not going to say how long ago, but character death was extremely common in the early years of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, I lost 1,000 characters at least. Probably more. And probably killed just as many.
Having seen your play style as a character as opposed to a GM, I can understand why. You do like to throw
there's no risk, no
right,
reward.
You throw yourself into danger a lot, and I think part of that is is kind of that excitement of the possibility of death.
If there's no risk, there's no real reward to it.
Right.
I've experienced on the player side total party death before, and I've seen total party death on the GM side. I've had players be upset about it, but never like freaking out, this is unfair, this isn't how the game's supposed to be played, upset. And I've had plenty of characters who went down having absolute glorious, wonderful deaths, that it became this thing that even though they didn't expect their character to die, and they didn't want their character to die, it was this like game-changing moment that would stay with the group forever, and you could tell stories about the time that, you know, Pax the Dwarf or whatever, you know, went down, and it just, it creates its own great part of the story element.
That's true.
And then these
Cool.
characters, if you're running continuous games, can even create their own legends within your game atmosphere. I think character death is beautiful and wonderful and very real and a necessary part of any role-playing game.
Well, I mean, D&D's so based on Lord of the Rings, right? And so, like, you think Boromir's death, like, you know,
That's one of
Yes.
the defining moments of that whole series.
Yeah.
Sure.
it establishes the real stakes. Like, it increases the stakes, for sure.
I don't like character death.
I know.
General rule.
Yeah, I can see that though. I mean, I see that in everything, like the way you play characters, the way you run games in general. Like you're not one of those GMs that's out there to murder the players.
Well, and I don't think James would say that he was.
Oh,
either,
not at
but
all.
I mean, but yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like that's definitely not my modus operandi. I think about. I think character death has a place when gaming. I think it is a little complicated when it comes to the live streaming piece. Like that's a very different.
Well, and a lot of like
to the whole situation.
Sure.
the shows that we deal with, like DFA was one of the hardest shows I ever worked on as playing a character because of the very real possibility of character death, and that being the end of your journey in that game.
Yeah.
So I've never liked the permadeath aspect.
Right.
Mostly because I like playing games, and it would suck to not be able to play games because I played a character that died.
Well, but even like the character death piece, I mean, I'm thinking, right now I'm jumbled in my head thinking of all these different situations and different ways in which I've seen a character go out in a campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think one that's still, there was a scarring incident in like the Zoe tabletop RPG group before Zoe even existed, when it was just that gentleman. And yeah, I mean, there's only a few people watching, so I can say this. But Nathan Rice was running a campaign, and it was set in Ravenloft.
And he is notoriously brutal as a GM.
And it was
already notorious. You're in Ravenloft.
yeah.
Your odds are slim to
so
none.
you're in
at best.
Ravenloft. You're in this gothic, dark, dangerous world where if you're a cleric, you're basically walking around with a
big beacon that
with
says "stab me in the face."
yeah, like a GPS beacon for every evil thing to come after you.
Paladins have it only slightly worse.
Exactly. And in the scenario, it was the campaign ran one session because there was one character was going to be introduced into the campaign. He was being held hostage, so the rest of the players were going to rescue this guy, and then the campaign would really begin. And what happened was we finally got to the point where it was this, the combat was going to ensue to rescue the guy, and it came down to a one-on-one battle to see who was going to come out on top. And Steve Woolbrock's character, Danica something, I forget, or Danny, I don't remember anyway.
Spring.
Yes, whatever, Anyway, died, failed, lost the encounter, lost the fight, and which meant that we weren't going to rescue the other guy who had then spent 4 hours of this gaming session just sitting there waiting for this
Waiting
to
to get
happen.
to play.
And then the rest of us, because our characters really had no in-game reason to stay with the group, we bolted because in character it was the right thing to do. Like, we had no real established connection to these guys.
I get that.
And then one or two other people in the group, they were playing recurring characters that they'd all used. A few of them had used in a prior campaign, including Steve's one. And so that they were like, oh, our friend has died. So they jump into, and then they get massacred as well. And then Nathan didn't GM again for a decade. Actually, almost 15 years. I mean, I think that was like 2003. And in 2014, 2015, I think was what.
I think maybe the hardest thing, I will say, Nathan is a very competitive player, no matter what game you're playing, and he doesn't love to lose. So GMing is hard for him in that he wants the story to be told, but he also doesn't want to lose the game. And it's a weird mentality to have, but it's bit him in the butt more than once. But it's made him a better storyteller in the long run.
I think character death as a GM is actually harder in many ways than as a player.
It can be.
Because you do find yourself with the ability at times to put your hand on the scale, one way or the other. You can
Very much.
You can prevent, or you can create. You can decide what is actually going to play out.
Hence the backlash on this show was he right to just let the character die?
There's no universal answer to that. Every play group, you're going to be setting your own tone and tempo based on like the type of game you're playing, who's running it, the characters, the game world, how serious it is. And then, something I'm not as experienced with as you guys are, the whole idea of a live stream. Once you're doing that, you're adding hundreds of players in essences around the table. And then what's the popular opinion then? What are the people, and no matter what you do, somebody is going to be offended or upset or not like the way things go. Oh, it was too easy for them. You shouldn't have killed that person. Or you shouldn't have given them that.
Well, especially in our community, specifically the Zoe kind of verse, in that our viewers actually are playing the game along with us. Whereas on that show, it's not quite to that extent. They really just kind of had to watch as this guy died because of essentially what comes down to dice, And they were mad.
A possibility.
I've had. Has anybody been there for a character blow up where the person is just done with the game?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I've been in a board gaming situation where someone has blown up.
We're not talking about that right now.
But it's not in the role playing.
Yeah, we're not
talking about that right now. There's no reason to bring that into this. A tiny table, I can flip this in a heartbeat, Mark. What do you got?
Okay, no, this is interesting. So there's history here, it looks like.
Mark is the reason that I now play cooperative strategy games, or more accurately, I am the reason why Mark introduced me to cooperative strategy games.
I see.
And Shadows of Camelot and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So what was the game that did it?
Settlers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which is
I hear that does that to a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's got a mechanic in it where if you're playing with the full 6 players in Settlers, you have the expansion, you're playing all 6. The way the mechanics work, it's relatively common that one of those 6 players will get in a situation where early in the game they are suddenly really no longer able to win. Like, it's technically possible, but like you'd have to roll 12 like 75 times in the next 80 rolls kind of thing.
It's realistically not going to happen.
It's just not going to happen. You've got 5 other players that are competing to win, and you can have a person get cut off so they can't really expand their territory at all.
Yeah.
Now, I've seen lots of people rage quit different strategy games, different board games. Hell, Monopoly is a friendship killer from long ago. Mario Kart will do that to people. I've seen that. But in these cooperative,
Damn you, or blue
in these
shell.
cooperative role-playing games, I think that those blow-ups can be so much bigger because you've invested so much into making this person your own. Whether that be your male power fantasy character or your bard that you've brought up from first level that catches a stray arrow at the wrong time. It can be jarring emotionally on a level that you can't equate with anything but losing a friend or a pet.
Well, I think everyone has different thoughts too on kind of like what constitutes a good death in an RPG. Like what feels like the first character who I lost in an RPG was beheaded by a what's it called, a Merilith
Marlith, the
or
demon.
Was it the one, or maybe it was the Balor afterwards? We went up against several demon high levels in a row. Whoever had the basically sword of decapitation, like a Vorpal sword,
Right.
a Vorpal blade. Yeah, that's right. And it was the combat had just begun. It was round 1, rolls a 20, and now I'm done.
Right, because that's how it goes.
It can happen.
And that was an incredibly frustrating feeling for a character
campaign
death because
a few
it
years
was
ago
like
where the same thing happened. I had the Vorpal blade. There's the big giant at the end, and it was just 2 hits, and it was over. Roll to hit, roll to confirm. Okay.
Yeah. Seen that go both ways as well. The only time I've done total party kill, it was the dice just hated the players that particular game. They were fighting a single enemy. He did have a Vorpal weapon. Every round, a player died.
Yeah, but James, also, you are notoriously dice fair. You make us roll damage against ourselves so we know exactly how much we're taking. You never fudge rolls, period.
I roll everything in front of all my players all the time, 100%. There's no hiding it, there's no fudging it. But in the games I play, there's also resurrection magic, there's raise magic, there's things for an unintended death can usually be dealt with in the group. Sometimes it's an intended death, and it's great for the story. But for the unintended deaths, almost every RPG has a mechanic for it. Maybe you didn't actually go down; you were just incapacitated. There's just so many ways around it. If it's really, truly disabling for the story, you can do something about it. And if it's not, if the element needs to be there, you can leave it there.
Well, I think the key thing is, in most things, the way to look at it is consent. And so, if you have the consent, if you're the GM and you're, even if you're doing a TV show or whatever, if you as the primary storyteller that's been writing this, and it's going to work for your story, it's not going to hurt the story, and that player, that's the actor that's working on the show, has your consent that they're okay with this happening, there comes a point where it's not really the fans' right to, especially going to the level of death threats and all the stuff that people do when, Joss Whedon kills off a major character, those kinds of things.
No spoilers. I haven't watched anything he's ever done.
Really?
That's a lot of
No, it's not possible.
That's not possible.
It's not. They would take away my nerd card.
That's fair. But it's all about the consent, and so the tricky spot is if you have consent of the player and the player is cool with it, and you're the GM, that's great. It's tricky when you get into, okay, now we have 10,000 fans who are watching our show and are also invested in that character, and how much right do they have to object to that as part of the storytelling?
Well, I think that depends on the level of agency that you give that audience. Sure. On a show like the one we're talking about now, certainly they've been following that character a long time, but they didn't kill him.
Well, I was going to say, there's no mechanic for them to influence the game, correct?
Right. Whereas with something like what we do with Metaverse, for example, the audience has all the agency in the world. They have their favorite characters, and they have ways to help get those characters over, make those characters succeed or fail. Absolutely. They have a certain amount of control there, and I think with that, that agency is much more warranted.
Yeah, I
they're
right.
I have no problem with them being upset about character deaths.
That's right. That was also part of the reason. When we started Metaverse, we didn't want, even though we wanted the stakes to be very high and very, very dire, we weren't there to kill players. There was never really a scenario, especially in the first season, up until the season finale, where the actual pilot characters were in any kind of actual mortal danger.
Avatars might be, but never a character.
Sure, but at that point, it's still, they're still fine.
Yeah.
Right.
And maybe they pop into a different avatar, or there was ways around that. Whereas I found the most stressful episodes of Metaverse to be the episodes where it's happening in the real world, and the stuff where we had to escape from the mansion and get on the boat and oh no, we're on a boat. This is gonna go bad for us because Chad's
gonna flood the boat. Yeah.
Right. they sunk a whole island. So in those episodes are really stressful for me as a player because Chris, although he may not be trying to kill our characters, could.
There are elements outside of his control.
Well, even if he thought it was going to be dramatically appropriate, I trust him as a storyteller. So if he says your character is dead, okay.
So far we've killed 2 characters on.
I was going to say, Thomas and Nick are both.
I mean, Nick kind of came the way he was. But
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
but
I killed my own character, really.
Yeah, well, and also we wanted to take
Ben's,
Thomas in a
Scott
more
was
interesting
killed.
direction as something as like one of he was really kind of a cool counterpart to what Nick ended up becoming. Yeah. Just like here's the other side of the coin. Here's this. And in no way the mainframe for what we have on the show on Project Metaverse in Tom. In no way at all.
In no way related whatsoever.
Well, and I think think about what you were saying there as a GM. Like, I definitely, I don't think I am as fair. I don't know what word to use. Like, I do respect like the description you were giving of how you GM, and so.
Well, it all depends
But
on the
you
game
don't
you're
play
playing.
like that. I don't play like that.
and
It depends on the game you're playing and who you're playing with and everything,
Right.
Like, what is done here is totally different. This is way more story-driven. The game I played for so many years was like that because it was sort of competitive, but more on the one-upmanship of it. Everything was heavy into the grid squares and the combat and trying to.
What's that?
Who can really, it was all about
that whole
pardon the
run and
language,
gun
pulling something
style
out
that
of your
only
ass.
that
Yes,
only
the
like
whole
5
game was
teenage boys can pull off together.
Yes, it was,
Where
it was
every
Ocean's 11, but there were only 4 of you and you're 12.
And it's it's the 90s, and so everything has to be hyper masculine as it is anyway. Like, we didn't know what to do with our feelings back then. We just stabbed things.
Conquered, stabbed, blew stuff up, came up with ingenious ways of using the 10-foot pole. I mean, it's just.
Well, and you again, you do again bring up, James, a good point about the format and the influence that has as well. Because I guess you're right. If I stop and think about how many GMing in a non-live streaming situation, I've killed several characters in that situation, and I mean it was just because that's where it went. With the way the combat ensued. I'll be honest, I do prefer it if they go down in a way that is somehow meaningful or dramatic or furthers the story. I mean, if they don't, so be it. But I mean, it's definitely preferable.
I follow the Angry GM on Twitter. I don't know if anybody else does, but I did also an article kind of about the 3 types of character deaths there are. There's like class 1, 2, and 3 deaths for PCs.
Absolutely.
And like the class 3 death is the one you want to avoid. That's the one where it's like the single saving throw trap that'll kill you instantly. The rocks that fall from the sky and wipe out the whole party. Just like a really
bad.
Just a really shit way to go.
There's
Bad
some
dice
value
rolls.
in that, though, from a storytelling standpoint.
Certainly.
That's real, right? Like,
it is.
That's really realistic that kind of shit happens in life.
Absolutely,
And,
it does,
that
but it
happens.
doesn't.
It goes back to the tone
It
of the
doesn't
game you're
usually
playing.
happen.
Right.
It doesn't
Right.
usually happen
Right.
in epic adventure stories, though.
No.
exactly.
Unless it's a D&D type game,
But
that's not going to happen.
depending on the circumstances, situation, the consent you have with your players, how the other characters are involved, like the amount of trauma and drama that it can create for the other characters of walking along and all of a sudden their husband is just taken out of the blue, and they've been fighting monsters and they're unbeatable and they feel like they can kill everything, and the character development and the way the storytelling can go when all of a sudden you're dealing with that trauma and everything can be powerful. Now, on the other hand, if you do that to a player who the player has actually lost her husband or his husband or something like that, that could be pretty horrifying. So again,
I think at that point, that's just you as a storyteller being an asshole.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like we're starting the game really sets the tone for something like that they've been
See,
talking about what this issue is with this online. It's all so much more story driven that I get that they're upset that their favorite character died, but if that's how the story is going and that's the way that person wants the story and is okay with the story, I mean, he had full capability to alter things before they went that way. It was obviously acceptable for the story to go the way.
And
for
also
fans,
keep in mind
they should just watch it.
Those old school dungeon crawl adventures, the story was in the dungeon. It wasn't about like the quest you had been sent on. It was about the way those character relationships grew through the perils they faced in that horrible dungeon. That's where the story really came from.
Yes.
Well, it's like the campaign I've been running on Thursday nights for a while now.
You're playing in a game with other people?
We agreed that this was an open GM relationship. I know you're seeing James on the side. Don't lie to me.
So is Nathan. Okay.
That's who I play with on Thursdays.
Stupid. Oh.
So, but during that session on Thursday, it was the climactic. It was the final confrontation of. It was a Pathfinder module. Spire's Sins of the Savior. Spires of Zin Shalom.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
It was great. Like they started in level 1 and then worked. We were level 15 at the end, and I wasn't there for the very beginning, but I came in, about a third of the way in. But it was hilarious to me when the GM started reading the flavor text for the final encounter and made some references to all of these things that had happened early on, throughout this module, all these adventures that these characters had, and none of those characters existed anymore. Like all of the characters, everyone who was playing at the table,
Everybody
except for me,
had been cycled
because
out.
I'd come in later, everyone else had died. Like every other character who'd begun this adventure.
But that makes its own kind of beauty in it.
Yeah, I mean, like,
And there's its own kind of beauty in it, but I don't know if it tells the best linear
No,
story
it
in the
doesn't
world
at all.
either.
It goes back
Like
to
if
what
I
kind
was
of game
making a
you play.
movie of that dungeon, I would make it the same party the whole time.
yeah, like from a movie standpoint, it was
Yeah,
kinda
the
like,
rogue's gonna die, but it's gonna be getting rid of the last trap and saving the rest of the party.
Yeah, there's- going back to that whole, it's what kind of game you're playing. Growing up in the really small town I was in, there weren't a lot of people that played, and there was a tiny little game store in town, and you could just go and pay $1 per character. Every time your character died, you had $1 for another sheet, and you would just sit around this giant table, and it was this dungeon that never ended. And you got your sense of accomplishment, and then every one of those traps that you made it through, every room that you survived, just making it through 3 rooms was a great accomplishment.
It's almost like a video game. Like you put.
That's
in your
still a
corner
great
and die
accomplishment in my opinion.
So
It
it
looks
was
like
this own beauty in it to be these 12 people had watched it. Oh, he dies, and then she dies, and then but you're still going forward, and everyone's throwing their character back into the meat grinder, just trying to make it through. It's its own beauty in it.
friends, I'm afraid that is all the time we're gonna have for today.
I was asked one quick question.
Yeah, I
if
was
that's
gonna
okay
say
from
you had
chat.
something to say.
Winder had asked just about our favorite systems to play, which I think actually can, in some ways, be
Yeah,
related back to that
we
topic.
got to wrap it up in a couple minutes, but yeah, let's talk about it. Like I love talking about my favorite systems to play.
Fire away.
Do you want me to start?
Whoever.
Because I got lots.
Same with you.
I love almost any superhero system that is well known. I've got pretty much every superhero RPG that has ever been published on its own special shelf, not individually. That would be a lot of shelves, but one shelf dedicated just to my superhero RPGs. And I love Shadowrun. I always have something
Love that
about
setting.
even the way the dice work, like the lethality of it, like. What a cool game! What a scary game to play! The action adventure, adrenaline junkie part of my gaming.
Yeah.
I've always loved that because it was the first system I learned how to break.
See, I love Shadowrun's world a lot.
Mhm.
It's just amazing. But playing a rigger with a fleet of vehicles, the rules for like driving, where it's like you're basically doing calculus with your dice.
Yeah.
So we simplified it down because it was just too much. Because it was like,
Well,
okay, and so what do you do? I do this. Okay, this happens. What do you do? This happens. What do you do? This
Well,
happens.
you know
And
I
what
like
do you
to
do?
hack systems,
Give me 20
you know?
minutes and I'll tell you.
I love
Yeah.
simplifying things.
Yeah.
I feel it makes for a more cinematic storytelling experience anyway. But then again, all of my GM experience is from shows like this.
Have you done any GMing?
I did
non-live
one 3-session thing a few years ago for a couple of friends. That was pretty much it.
Well, for me, I don't really have a lot of play experience outside of the various incarnations of D&D. I run almost every system there is, but it's really hard to get somebody to sit on the other side of the screen for me. I don't know what the problem is or whether they won't. But so I've always loved them. I'm sold on. Currently, I run a Pathfinder game with Christian and Maggie and Nathan. And,
Starfinder.
Or excuse me, Starfinder. Starfinder is just it's Pathfinder in space. I love it. It's fun. It's great. But I've been really sold on the Savage Worlds rule system.
Mm-hmm.
The diversity. I can do
A huge fan
anything I
myself.
want, anywhere I want, and even more recently, this whole tri-stat. I love to tell really huge, expansive, massive stories, and tri-stat is all about story and less about number crunching.
Although
like
there
that.
are a lot of numbers. Like if you're just
You
learning
can
the
get
system.
crunchy if you really want to.
Yeah, it's easy
But if
to
you've
get
been
crunchy.
doing 3.5 and 3.0 and
Yes.
second
Yeah.
edition and first edition,
Also, the way we do it for Metaverse is so
Or Shadowrun.
it's so more about what's for the story as opposed to what's in the book.
Yeah.
There
Like
is
the-
no borking skill in the
like
book.
the min-
I
the
checked.
min-
but I have a
Min-maxer.
soft spot for Palladium's TMNT. It's like my old school.
Yeah.
Let's say the min-maxer in me still loves like the 3.5 Pathfinder, kind of those all those iterations, because there's so many ways to break the damn thing. Like it's just so much fun to take those pieces and put it together.
I can build anything.
But that's what I mean, though. It's just being able to how do I put all these pieces together?
Viable, maximized anything?
I tend to fall down that hole too often.
With that, and more concerned with building the coolest.
All you DG guys are like that.
But I mean, I think that's one of the things
Is
that
it
I
from
love.
playing with Nathan?
Maybe. I mean, but I think one of the things that I love so much about, because he gets so upset if you build a better character. So that's that's on camera. No, I'm kidding.
If he's running that game that you're in, you're screwed.
He does actually, yeah.
That's real.
You're screwed.
Yeah, no, he spent a lot of time the last session complaining that he couldn't do anything and then doing things. So, I know you're shocked about any of this. You have no comment to make at all.
I've had a great fun.
Yeah,
he is a lot of fun.
He's been so laid back in our game.
He's a lot of fun.
But really a wonderful source of comic relief.
But your Tri-Stat comment, though, I really have enjoyed just how much flexibility there is in there to really, really play with. Not needing to worry about all the specific mechanics to do something.
And the diversity, I love it. From superheroes to cowboys to space princesses to... Great.
He's really been enjoying the character creation process.
Oh yeah, I believe it. That's scary.
Yeah, no, you should be frightened. The stuff that he's come up with, I feel bad for Project Metaverse people going forward. Like those pilots are in some deep shit. I mean, spoilers.
Cool.
Anyway, that's got to be it for us today. I've got another show to run here real soon. Make sure if you're still online, you check us out on Project Metaverse here at 6 p.m. And we're going to have a heck of a game today. It's Fight Day in Superhero Land, so a throwdown will inevitably ensue.
With capes.
With capes.
With
No
capes.
capes.
Anyway, thanks for joining us on Culture on a Stick. We'll see you next time. My name's Christian Doyle. This has been Mark Thomas and Chris Odie and James Durham. We will see you next time.